Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for day 2 of our first annual Sustainable Living Week. I'm very glad to have you here again today. If you were able to join us yesterday, that's fantastic. And if not, the recording for yesterday's lesson is available on our website, so you can go and watch it again. As we usually do in our week-long lessons, we're going to start today with a couple of questions about how much we already know about sustainable living. So here's question 1. What is a circular economy? Now, we discussed this in yesterday's lesson. If you weren't here yesterday, don't worry, you can still have a guess, and then you can find out if you're right and find out more in the recording. So, is a circular economy a system where materials are used for as long as possible using principles such as reuse and recycling? If you think it's that, put 2 hands up. Or is it a system where materials are made into products and then thrown away to end up as waste? Put 1 hand up. Or put your hand on your head if you think it's a system where materials that can be recycled are recycled and the rest ends up as waste. Have a look at the chat and see what we think about this. A lot to think about in one go. Just have a guess of what you think. Seeing a lot of schools so far saying 2 hands up. Just have a guess and see what you think. Lots and lots of answers saying 2 hands up. In fact, most people are saying 2 hands up. That's good because you're correct. The second option, if you remember, is called a linear economy, which is not sustainable. And the third option is closer to what we have currently, which is also not very sustainable, but it's kind of halfway in between. Should remember that sustainability means using resources in a way that could continue forever without running out or causing harm to the environment or people. Okay, true or false? You can make leather from pineapple leaves. This sounds very cool. Now, if you think it's true, put 1 hand up. If you think it's false, put your hand on your head. Be very cool if it was true. Lots and lots of guesses of true. Let's find out. Hey, it's true. It's called Pinatex. I hope I'm saying that right. And it's a semi-synthetic leather made from a combination of fibers from pineapple leaves and a petrol-based resin. And leather is normally made, as you know, from the skin of animals, treated with lots of different chemicals that can be harmful to the environment. But Pinatex uses a waste product, pineapple leaves, to make leather. But we still need to consider the full cycle of the product because it's not biodegradable. So it doesn't return to soil if left outside. So we need to think about what could happen to it at the end of its lifespan. If you're interested, you can have a Google of that and see if you can learn more. Okay, so everyone who was with us at yesterday's lesson, can you tell us one thing that you learned yesterday? One thing that really stuck in your head? I really enjoyed learning more about the circular economy, more about the different steps needed to get there. And I enjoyed the exercise we did where we placed all of the steps in a circle. Yes, someone from Stratham Primary School remembers that cars stand still for about 92% of their life. And Far High cluster schools are remembering the circular economy, the difference between the linear economy and the circular economy. Yep, there was a lot in yesterday's lesson, a lot of facts and a lot of information that we're going to build on throughout the week. 33% of bananas are wasted is another one. That's a good one, yes. And that a drill is only used for about like an electric drill, like a tool that you'd use for hanging pictures on the wall, for example, is only used for about 13 minutes over its whole lifespan. That's not very long, is it? So remember, we discussed things like tool libraries that can help with that. So today we are joined by two fantastic speakers. We have Catherine Newman from the Scottish Fairtrade Forum and Andy Ashcroft from Cool Schools. So I'd like to invite you to start your presentations now.
Thanks a lot, Sheena. So
thank you, Catherine.
I'll definitely be looking back at yesterday's recording and Googling pineapples for sure. So let's get started. Here we go. So good morning, everyone. And let me just stop for a second, actually, because I just need to make sure I share the sound as we've got a video here. So here we go. There we go. So yeah, I'm Catherine from the Scottish Fairtrade Forum, and I'm here with Andy Ashcroft. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, Andy? Okay, so we're going to be looking at how Fairtrade pushes the cotton industry to be more sustainable for both people and for the planet. So what is the issue or problem? So it's well summarised in an animation about the International Fair Trade Charter, which we don't have time to look at this morning, but please do look at afterwards. But it says the way that we're currently doing business and trade isn't working. So we know about global poverty and climate change and the climate crisis. And it's very often the more marginalised people who are more greatly affected. So, for example, people who may live in extremely rural places around the world, and in many cases who rely on farming to make their living. So Fairtrade was established back in around the 1960s as an alternative way of doing global business and trade that cares about people, especially the most marginalised people, and the planet. So you'll have seen this image before. So the world is very aware of this problem, and I guess it's why we're here today. So world leaders came together in 2015 and made a historic promise to secure the rights and the well-being of everyone on a healthy, thriving planet when they adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So the idea is that economic growth should create greater opportunities for everyone, reduce inequalities, raise basic standards of living, and should promote sustainable management of our natural resources and ecosystems. But we know this is currently not the case. So Fairtrade aims to be a solution to some of these issues, particularly when it comes to goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. And Andy, you're going to talk us through how Fairtrade, organic cotton, Cool Schools and your suppliers are working towards this goal. So before moving on, let's have a look at the production of a standard non-fair trade, non-organic t-shirt by watching part of this TED Education short film called The Life Cycle of a T-shirt by Angel Chang from a few years ago. So we're just going to watch a few minutes of this.
Consider the classic white t-shirt. Annually, we sell and buy 2 billion t-shirts globally, making it one of the most common garments in the world. But how and where is the average t-shirt made, and what's its environmental impact? Clothing items can vary a lot, but a typical t-shirt begins its life on a farm in America, China, or India, where cotton seeds are sown, irrigated, and grown for the fluffy bolls they produce. Self-driving machines carefully harvest these puffs. An industrial cotton gin mechanically separates the fluffy bolls from the seeds, and the cotton lint is pressed into 225-kilogram bales. The cotton plants require a huge quantity of water and pesticides. 2,700 liters of water are needed to produce the average t-shirt, enough to fill more than 30 bathtubs. Meanwhile, cotton uses more insecticides and pesticides than any other crop in the world. These pollutants can be carcinogenic, harm the health of field workers, and damage surrounding ecosystems. Some t-shirts are made of organic cotton, grown without pesticides and insecticides, but organic cotton makes up less than 1% of the 22.7 million metric tons of cotton produced worldwide. Once the cotton bales leave the farm, textile mills ship them to a spinning facility, usually in China or India, where high-tech machines blend, card, comb, pull, stretch, and finally twist the cotton into snowy ropes of yarn called slivers. Then yarns are sent to the mill, where huge circular knitting machines weave them into sheets of rough grayish fabric, treated with heat and chemicals until they turn soft and white. Here, the fabric is dipped into commercial bleaches and azo dyes, which make up the vivid coloring in about 70% of textiles. Unfortunately, some of these contain cancer-causing cadmium, lead, chromium, and mercury. Other harmful compounds and chemicals can cause widespread contamination when released as toxic wastewater in rivers and oceans. Technologies are now so advanced in some countries that the entire process of growing and producing fabric barely touches a human hand, but only up until this point. After the finished cloth travels to factories, often in Bangladesh, China, India, or Turkey, human labor is still required to stitch them up into t-shirts. Intricate work that machines just can't do. This process has its own problems. Bangladesh, for example, which has surpassed China as the world's biggest exporter of cotton t-shirts, employs 4.5 million people in the t-shirt industry, but they typically face poor conditions and low wages. After manufacture, all those t-shirts travel by ship, train, and truck to be sold in high-income countries, a process that gives cotton an enormous carbon footprint. Some countries produce their own clothing domestically, which cuts out this polluting stage. But generally, apparel production accounts for 10% of global carbon emissions. And it's escalating. Cheaper garments and the public's willingness to buy boosted global production from 1994 to 2014 by 400% to around.
Okay, we're going to leave that there. But I hope you found out something that you maybe didn't know already. And for me, it was definitely, I didn't realise how harmful some of the dyes can be. So let's move on. We now have a very quick Fairtrade quiz to get you thinking. We're going to whiz through it, but please do feed your answers into your teachers and we'll see if you're right. So the answers are going to be A, B, or C. And if your teacher wants to pop your answer in the chat, then please go ahead and do that. We've got a couple of questions a little bit later on as well. Okay, so question number 1. How many households around the world work in cotton production? Is it 100 million, 1 million, or 250,000? That's how many households around the world work in cotton production. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Okay, here comes the answer. So it is 100 million households are directly engaged in cotton production in around about 85 countries in the world. So that's a lot of people involved in making our clothes. Okay, on to number 2. What percentage of the world's cotton is produced sustainably? Is it 1%, 13%, or 40%? So tell your teachers your answers. So that's what percentage of the world's cotton is produced sustainably. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Okay, here we go with the answer. It is 13%, which means that there's a lot of room for improvement. So it's estimated that the environmental and social footprint of Fairtrade cotton is 5 times lower than conventional cotton farming that we saw in the animation. And Andy's going to go into some more detail about that for us. Okay, and the third question for now is how many litres of water does it take to make one cotton t-shirt? Is it 123, 1,705, or 2,720? That's how many litres of water does it take to make one cotton t-shirt? I'll give you a couple of seconds again. Okay, here comes the answer. Yep, it's 2,720. So cotton's dependency on water makes its growth and yields very vulnerable to water shortages, which occur as a result of higher temperatures and changes in the volumes and patterns of rainfall caused by climate change. And also, if you think about it, that's a lot of water to throw away on fast fashion garments. So by the end of our session today, we hope to have considered a more sustainable option. Andy, would you like to introduce Cool Schools? Andy, are you unmuted?
Sorry, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so the school uniform industry is a massive industry, £2 billion every year, believe it or not, but very few schools know where the uniform comes from, whether it is made sustainably or whether the people that make it are paid fairly. We set up this business, Cool Schools, because we wanted to do things differently. We are the UK's only Fairtrade certified school uniform supplier. And with Fairtrade, we know that our cotton farmers will be paid fairly and that all the factories in our chain will be signed up to Fairtrade minimum standards, which means that those factories are subjected to on-the-spot audits or inspections, if you like, that discourage nasties like child labour, enforced overtime and bad working conditions. Our entire factory chain and all of our cotton farmers are based in India. So India is a very special and important country for our business. And for some time, I'm pleased to say that Scotland has been Cool Schools' fastest growing market for Fairtrade school uniform. Over 60 schools now we supply all over Scotland. And an integral part of our business is also coming to schools and delivering free Fairtrade assemblies and class sessions and so on, because we like to share our stories with you. My latest visit to India was last November, where I spent a week living and working with the cotton farmers and a week with our factory. So many of the photos that you see on the slides today are from that visit. So very hot off the press, if you like. Once again, on that visit, I saw for myself how Fairtrade supports these people through fair prices and decent working conditions, and how through totally organic cotton growing and eco factories, we can be proud to be working at the UK end of one of the most sustainable supply chains on the planet. And we're going to talk a little bit about supply chains a bit later. Just as a parting shot on this slide, I think it's great that so many schools have joined us today. It tells me that you are all interested in sustainable living. You are the customers of the future, and we need more young people like you interested in choosing sustainable fair trade clothing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. So can you tell us what difference can a fair trade and organic polo shirt make to people and the planet?
Okay, so our polo shirts are made with a mix of 50% fair trade organic cotton and 50% recycled polyester. For the people in our supply chain, the journey starts by ensuring that our fair trade organic cotton farmers are paid fairly and that they also receive the very important fair trade premium, which they can spend on development projects that benefit their community, education, health, fresh water wells in remote farming villages. But the key thing about the fair trade premium is that it's their decision on how to spend this money. Then the people in our factories are paid 25 to 30% above the national minimum wage in India. They work the same hours per day as we do here in the UK. The factory has a clinic and looks after their health needs by offering them private health insurance. And there is a creche and school adjoining the factory that some of the workers' children go to each day. The factory also gives them free transport to and from the factory. For the planet, our farmers grow their cotton 100% organically. There are no pesticides and no harmful fertilizers on our organic cotton farms at all. This means that our farms are making a big contribution to sustainability and a positive contribution, if you like, to climate change. Our principal factory uses solar power and 90% of the waste is recycled. So our clothes are made in the most sustainable way possible, with even the clothing labels and swing tickets made of recycled cotton. All of the factories in our supply chain, 5 altogether in the clothing supply chain, have adapted sustainability-friendly processing techniques.
Great. Can you just mute for a second, Andy, while I ask you the next question? Thank you. So, Andy, this is your supply chain. Can you just remind us what a supply chain is? And can you also mention how long it takes from picking the cotton to actually holding the final garments in your hands? Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it might surprise you to hear that from the original planting of the cotton seed through to the final cut, make and trim, which is the photo on the right, in the final factory of the 5 that process the cotton into clothing, it takes around about 1 year. So it's a long time to produce cotton clothes. And a supply chain, which is what we're looking at there, is a network of all the people, organizations, resources, activities, and technology involved in the creation and sale of a product. As I say, 5 different factories are involved, and being part of a Fairtrade certified supply chain helps to ensure that the many people that work to produce our clothing, imagine the many thousands of people that are working in those 5 factories and the many thousands of farmers that are involved in producing the cotton. And being part of a Fairtrade chain means that those people are paid and treated fairly, and that our cotton growing and clothes making is being as kind to the planet as it possibly can be. This is what Fairtrade certification is all about, a sustainable supply chain.
Thanks, Andy. If you don't mind just muting when I ask the questions. Thank you. So we're looking at the cotton fields here, and I know these are your photos from November. Can you tell us what's going on here?
Of course. So the photo on the left, as we look at the slide, is a typical cotton field, a typical organic cotton field as part of our cotton growing community. So you have the cotton lines in the middle of the photo, and either side you have plants growing that are actually what we call intercrops. These are food crops that are grown by the farmers organically as well, of course, and these help the farmers to become self-sustainable in food production, as well as being able to sell their cotton. In this case, those plants are actually lentils that the farmers are growing to make one of the favorite Indian national dishes, which is, of course, dal. In the second photo, this is the famous, it's called the yellow sticky trap. Just a yellow piece of board that a special organic gum is applied to that attracts some of the insects that are harmful to the plants. This is used in place of harmful pesticides that are often part of crop spraying that uses vast amounts of water. So remember, these organic cotton fields are rain-fed. They're not using excessive amounts of water. So not like the T-shirts in the film that we've just seen. In the third photo, these are daughters of cotton farmers who, during my visit, told me of the improved education in their villages as a result of the Fairtrade premium that we were talking about earlier. In the fourth photo, that very ordinary looking cotton storage building, makes an extraordinary contribution to the well-being of our Fairtrade organic cotton communities in that particular area. This was again funded by the Fairtrade Premium, and one of its main contributions is that it enables the farmers to store their cotton in that storage facility before they all, like many millions of cotton farmers throughout India, had to store it literally in their front room. So when we see the piles of cotton later, I want you to imagine storing that in your front room if you're a cotton farmer. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Andy. So we've heard about the cotton fields and we're on to ginning. So can you remind us what ginning is and tell us what's happening here?
So cotton ginning is the first part of the factory process. Remember, there are 5 factories involved, and at the cotton gin, the cotton is literally cleaned. There are these giant sieves that go backwards and forwards, and they sift out all of the impurities in the cotton, dead bugs, live bugs, dirt, you name it. But also a very important other thing is sifted out of the cotton at that stage, and that's the cotton seeds that we can see in the middle photo there in that slide, and it's the very good cotton seeds that are kept for next year's harvest. And from the ginning factory, the cotton is sent on to the next factory in the process, which is the spinning factory.
Okay, but before we move on, Andy, I've got some seed cotton here, and it's so soft and fluffy. So what I want to know, looking at the third photo, is, did you take the chance to jump into that pile of cotton?
I think you know the answer to that, Catherine.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, so we're going to move on to spinning and knitting. If you're able to run us through that, Andy, please.
Sure. So the spinning factory is where the cotton arrives. If you remember the giant 225 kg bales, it arrives from the ginning factory, and the cotton fibers are combed, aerated, and gradually twisted together. And you see in the middle photo, you'll remember in the film they were talking about the it's almost like cotton rope, and from there, that rope, the cotton fibers are twisted further and turned into yarn or thread. From this, which is what we're looking at in the left-hand photo. So from the spinning factory, and on the right is one of the amazing machines in the knitting factories that brings in the cotton yarn and also thread made from recycled polyester. So if you can just about see those little threads coming down from the top of the machine there's a mixture of Fairtrade organic cotton thread and recycled polyester thread. In other words, thread basically made from plastic bottles, and they're being knitted together into the fabric that makes our clothes.
Thanks, Andy. If you could mute, please. Thank you. So next slide. I've actually been waiting for this one because in the animation we watched how the dyeing process leaks into nearby water sources such as lakes and rivers and seas. Can you tell me how this is different?
When the fabric has been knitted, the colour of the fabric is always what we call greige, or a sort of very light brown or almost grey colour, which you can see from the fabric on the shelves there in the dyeing factory, in the photo on the left and in the middle. One in the middle, they're actually doing final checks on the fabric to make sure there are no flaws in it. Then in the photo on the right, those giant vats of various sizes dye that grey fabric into the required different colours. In our case, in Cool School's case, they're the standard, if you like, school uniform colours of white, royal blue, navy, red, black, bottle green, yellow, jade, and so on. What is sustainable, though, in our factory that makes it very different from those factories that are, if you like, spewing out toxic waste into rivers and lakes and so on around the world? Well, our dyeing factories have ETP collection tanks, effluent treatment plants, and also reverse osmosis plants Both of those are employed as an effective advanced treatment technology for the treatment and reuse of textile and dyeing wastewater. So there's total water recycling that goes on in our dyeing factories. Very quickly, some of the certifications they have a ZDHC certificate, which stands for Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals certificate. They're members of the Higg Index, which measures social environmental impacts. And they do detox dyeing, which helps factories to eliminate hazardous chemicals throughout the factory to ensure sustainable production. So, in summary, our dyeing factories are the complete opposite of the dyeing factories that we saw in that film.
Thanks, Andy. So this is Cut, Make and Trim, the final factory. Can you tell us a bit more about this, please? Just need to unmute yourself, Andy.
So the children you see on the right are in a school that is partially funded by the Indian government, right next to the factory, but also partially funded by the factory. In the factory, there is also a creche. There's about 65% of the women in that factory are single mums who, if they are not given the opportunity to become seamstresses or checkers at our factory, would find it very hard to gain employment because of local cultural barriers. So our factory gives those women a lifeline. And they're wonderful people, they're very happy people, and they're very, very happy in their work because at the end of the day, remember, we're treating them fairly. The factory is treating them fairly, and that's what Fairtrade helps to do for us. And this is an eco factory that we're looking at in the very true sense of the word, where about 95% of the energy is solar powered, as is 95% of the water recycled for reuse. The workers are paid 25 to 30% above the national minimum wage, and as I said earlier, they've got health insurance paid for by the factory. They work an 8-hour day. And they have buses, factory owned and funded, run buses that take them to and from the factory every day. And all of those things put together are the complete opposite of a phenomenon that is well known in the world with regard to the developing country clothing industry, which is the sweatshop phenomenon. So we're the opposite of a sweatshop, if you like.
Thank you, Andy. And finally, how do the garments get here? Just to unmute again. Andy, if you could just unmute.
I clicked it and then it didn't click. Sorry about that, guys. Our finished clothes are packed in biodegradable bags and cartons and shipped by road to Chennai from Tirupur, where the journey is usually through the Suez Canal via ship, taking on average 25 to 30 days. At the moment, of course, with the problems going on in the Red Sea that you may have been reading and hearing all about, the journey is taking 35 to 40 days. So unfortunately, that's more costly and there are more carbon emissions. So we're hoping that that security situation in the Red Sea is sorted out very soon.
Thank you, Andy. And now we're on to what you can do at home. So we can do our bit, and it makes a big difference to the carbon footprint of a garment if, for example, you wash it less. So think about your clothes before you put them in the wash. Can you wear them a couple of times before you wash them? And if it's not you doing the washing, you can pass the following tips on to the person who does in your house. So you can wash the garments at a lower temperature, like 30 degrees. You can line dry your clothes either in or outside instead of tumble drying. And you can, of course, repair your garments using your new stitching skills that you've been learning this week to repair your clothes. And of course, make sure you reuse, hand down and donate your clothes that no longer fit. Okay, so in this slide, we see Sustainable Development Goal 12. So we have a responsibility as sustainable consumers, And we also have the 2 labels associated with Fairtrade products here. So if we can, we could bear SDG 12 in mind when we're shopping, not just for cotton or for clothes, but for everything. Ask yourself, do I need it? How many times will I wear or use it? And has the product been produced sustainably? Does it have any labels that show me it's been produced sustainably? So for me, those are some good starting points in being a responsible consumer. Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we can all make a difference here. Look at the labels on your garments, as Catherine says. Do they tell you anything other than where the clothes have actually been made? If there are no ethical certifications like the Fairtrade Cotton Mark or the World Fair Trade Organization WFTO label, then we should maybe start to ask some questions. And indeed, sometimes when we go shopping, perhaps we should ask, the likes of Fat Face or Hollister or Tommy Hilfiger or the brands, why do they not have more fair trade cotton in their garments? So we can all do something. You guys are the consumers of the future, so you can have a real impact with your individual actions.
Okay, so Andy, you're going to take us through a couple of quick questions.
Yes. So what percentage of the world's clothing is made from cotton? Is it 30%, 43%, or 70%? So the answer, believe it or not, is 70%. And what percentage of that cotton is certified fair trade cotton? So when we're talking about certified fair trade cotton, remember we're talking about a fair price for the cotton farmers and the fair trade premium, which helps them with community development. Is it 15%? Is it less than 1%? Or is it 7%? And sadly for us, it's still less than 1%. Okay.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, so follow on from today's session. To get you started finding out a little bit more about fair trade, if you search up the 10 principles of fair trade, that's a good place to start. And also the Fairtrade Foundation has a basic needs versus wants activity, which will be available for you. You can watch and consider the animation about the International Fair Trade Charter that I mentioned at the start. You can check out the lesson plans from Cool Schools by getting in touch with Andy. And you can create a poster from today's session about why a Fairtrade cotton uniform is a good choice. Andy, this is one of your photos. What's going on here?
Well, one of the most enjoyable activities from the November-December visit to India that I conducted outside of the cotton farms and visiting the factories was to visit a girls' high school that we're supporting under our Fair Trade Offset scheme. And this is a boarding school. 80% of the girls that attend that school are the daughters of Fair Trade organic cotton farmers. And so we thought we'd give the girls an activity for the day, which was we ran a painting competition. Cool Schools bought all of the crayons, the coloured crayons and the paper, and we asked those girls to paint a picture which described their community to communities in our country that obviously didn't know about their communities. And as you can see from those pictures, they're very, very talented, and they produce some wonderful pictures, 60 of which I brought back in my suitcase with me, and we're going to put them all over the walls of our premises here in Southampton to brighten up the place. But yeah, it was a lovely day, and very enthusiastic girls and very talented too.
Great, thanks, Andy. And finally, there is a charity called Transform Trade, and currently they're asking us to email our MPs, for support for a fashion watchdog, so an organisation that monitors the fashion industry here in the UK, which is much needed. So you can check that out as well. Okay, so we hope you've been able to find out how fair trade is a sustainable option, both for people and for the planet. Thank you for listening, everyone, and please do get in touch if you have any questions. If it's about fair trade and fair trade in Scotland generally, it's me, Catherine Newman. And if it's about fair trade cotton and cotton uniform, it's Andy. Over to you, Andy.
Yeah, just to say, Catherine, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for having us today. I visit Scotland very regularly, at least twice a year. I'm coming up to the East Coast in March for a week. So if there are any schools in Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire, listening in today, please do email me if you'd like a Cool Schools visit. Likewise, I'm doing a West Coast swing probably at the middle of May. Any schools that would like me to visit on the West Coast, but any schools in general, we're always very interested to hear from, and if we get enough interest from a particular area, we'll make every effort to visit you. Just to let you know, no school is too far away. We visited schools on Orkney, in Ullapool, Aberdeenshire, Mid Wales, you name it. So yeah, we'd be very happy to come and see you and share our project with you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy, and enjoy the rest of your week, everyone.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Catherine and Andy. I've really enjoyed learning about all the different steps it takes to make cotton clothing. I knew it was a complicated process, but I hadn't quite appreciated just how many steps were involved. Thank you so much for that. I also really enjoyed hearing about your work, Andy, with making school uniform, in particular fair trade. That's a brilliant thing, and I hope some schools keep your offer of a school visit in mind.
Thank you.
So
Katrina.
that's all we have for today, but don't forget, we would like you to have a look at the resources in the folder that was sent to teachers and have a go at learning some basic stitching techniques so that you can have a go at repairing your own clothes if they get holes in them. For example, here's one of the things you could do. You could try sewing your name. So I have done mine. And later on, I'm thinking that maybe I'll put some flowers or maybe something along here to fill up this space as well. So I'll show you again tomorrow and see how far I get. If you've had a go at this, please, we'd love to see the results. And also, we would like you, if you have time, to try creating a video inspired by a video called Fast Fashion Dining, which you can watch after this lesson if you like, to use your voice to ask for change in the fashion industry. And this is as well as writing to your MP to ask for a fashion watchdog. I think that's a very good idea. You could use your video to do the same, and you could send it to your MP that way too. These videos could be put into our Young Reporters for the Environment competition, which finishes up at the end of April. And we're always looking especially for video entries on issues that young people feel strongly about. If you have any questions about today's lesson or yesterday's lesson or any of the topics that we're discussing so far this week, please remember that you can email us at ecoschools@keepscotlandbeautiful.org. We'll do our best to answer your question. If we don't know, we'll do our best to find the answer for you from our guests this week. And we can share the answers at our assembly on Friday, which I hope you'll be able to join us for. And also, as always, you can find us on social media, most platforms at KSB Scotland. And we're looking forward to seeing all of your amazing work this week, to showcase it at Friday's assembly, together with answering any of your questions. So if you carry out any of the activities this week, please let us know, and please send us an example. We always love to hear from you, even if you just say hello. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll also be able to join the rest of our lessons this week. But for today, that's all we have. So bye for now.